We are live. Welcome to the Soccer Hero podcast. I'm Jono Proudfoot. And in 2015, amid a lawsuit, financial crisis, the birth of my first child, I was trying to harbor focus and discipline, and I was nowhere. I was frustrated because I knew where I wanted to be, and it felt like I would never get there. Then I read The Practicing Mind, and it completely changed the way I saw goals and hard work forever. So I'm beyond excited to have Tom Sterner, the author of The Practicing Mind, in the studio today to talk to us about harboring focus and discipline. Tom, it's great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. I was excited to get here.
That's good. Well, I can tell you what, you're not missing out on the South African weather everyone talks about. It is freezing in Cape Town. But to get straight into it, you've written this book. I know that you've written subsequent books and working on another one, but The Practicing Mind was on focus and discipline. So how did you become an expert on focus and discipline?
Well, my work was really in the trenches for decades, and it was born out of a lack of a practicing mind. I mean, growing up as a kid, I was really good at coming up with ideas. I was very right-brained and jumping on tasks that I wanted to accomplish. And what I found was that I would burn up the initial enthusiasm pretty quickly. And then as soon as that was over with, I was in this internal battle of getting myself to continue with the process of whatever it was that I was doing. So for example, as a musician, I started playing music when I was very young, and I got pretty serious later in my teens. And the thing was, I wanted everything that practice was going to give me, all the joy and the skills and everything, but I just hated practice. I just hated to practice. And I thought, I have to get over this if I'm going to be the person that I want to be, if I'm going to be the musician I want to be. And I felt really disempowered because I didn't seem to be in control of it. The one thing that saved me was I was very internally aware of the conversation and the feelings that went with that. I would notice that I'll pick this task, I'm going to do this, whatever it was. If it was working out at the gym, I'd get the clothes, I'd do everything I needed, and then I'd go to the gym, and I was really pepped up with it. And then after 2 weeks or so, I don't really feel like going. And then that cycle would start again. And it got to the point where I began, when I start something new, I would wonder in my mind, I wonder how long this is going to last before I start to feel like not doing it, and then I drop off of it. So when I was in probably around 19, I decided I have to solve this because I'm never going to be who I want. I'm never going to have any real power if I don't. And at that point, I didn't have any idea how I was going to do that because I didn't know what was out there. Then a buddy of mine in college gave me his philosophy course book, which was Religions of the World. And I started reading through there, and that was where I got exposed to Zen and present moment. And something about that just really resonated with me. So I took off in a massive study on that for about 10 years and practicing. Then I'd study meditation with different people from all different areas and different types of meditation. And then when I got about 26 or 27, I saw sports psychology and peak performance, and I thought, let me study this. And and then that eventually went into neuroscience. But the thing that fascinated me about it was that they were two sides of the same coin. I mean, what we're doing now is just proving out through empirical Western science what has been talked about for thousands of years. But we're more comfortable with it because it's got metrics to it, and we can say, look at this here. See, we did this study and it shows this, and this. And this guy over here, he just talked about it when he meditated in a cave. So we really can't, pay attention to that. So, so that was it. And I've been at that since I was a late teen. I've continued, I research it all the time. What's new, what's coming out, what are the studies showing, and then applying it to my own life and journaling to make sure that I keep up on how it's impacting me. And then I have a whole archive of clients that I've worked with over the years. And I have recordings of every conversation we've had and every question they've asked me and every response I've come up with for the question. So it's quite a bit of information.
Sure. Now, in your book, you wrote about, so just to give people an idea of how disciplined one can get, the two things that really stand out from reading your book is that you got to a point where you could enjoy practicing golf, but more importantly, when you were tuning pianos. Am I right in saying there were about 2,000 movements in tuning a piano?
Yes, there's about 235 pins in the piano that you have to put your wrench on. It varies a little bit from one piano to another because the string scales aren't all the same. But when you tune a piano, you have to adjust the tension on each one of those pins several times. It's not you just put it on once and you turn it and then it's done. It's several times because everything that you change is interrelated. So if you change this note, it changes its relationship with all the other notes. So you just keep refining and refining. And really that's the way the piano works in general. If you look at the keyboard on a grand piano, you've got over 5,000 parts. Each note's got about 34 adjustments on it. Each adjustment in the train is the same thing. If you turn this adjustment 1/8 of an inch, it's going to change its relationship with everything else. So the repetition is unbelievable in piano work. And generally in high level concert work, you're always working in solitude. You're just there by yourself. Many times I was in the concert hall at 5 o'clock in the morning with just a spotlight on the piano, and I would be there for hours doing adjustments and testing things, and then having to come back and meet with the artist to make sure, because they're pushing the instrument to the limit, and you want the instrument to get out of the way so that it's just like a transparent interface. So yes, the repetition was a great incubator because I had to do the stuff over and over again, and I had to discover a way of how do I keep my mind in the present and not be thinking about something I'm going to do later, or get away from this feeling of, I just don't feel like doing this. I just don't feel like doing this. I do it every day. I've done this adjustment millions of times. I'm tired of it. How do you get away from that? Because what you're doing in that particular situation really mattered.
Well, that's good. That's something I want to talk about, because obviously, if I was doing that, the thing on my mind would be like, I want to get this done. I never want to see this piano ever again. And so the goal is obviously to like get the piano tuned, and the process is to do what you're doing. And you said that there's something wrong with the way we see goals. So what is wrong with the way we see goals?
Well, we misuse the goal. What we do is we look at the goal as someplace we have to get to, instead of a steerage, instead of like something to steer our energy. So when you say, here's my goal, and it's out there, and now I have this gulf of time in between me and the moment that I achieve the goal, the moment I have the product, however you want to say it. And that means that now you're at war with the process of everything that is, because this is getting in your way of the feeling that you think you're going to have when you have the goal. And if you look at your life, we've done this ever since we were kids. If I just have this, if I just have that, once I get this done. But what we do is, as soon as we finish that and that journey is miserable, we just replace it with another one. And so when you learn that the joy of everything is in the process of attaining it, of achieving it, it really transforms everything. I mean, if I take a piece of chalk and I just draw a line on the sidewalk and I say to you, well, there's a finish line, go ahead and step over it. It doesn't mean anything, because there's been nothing that has led to that. What makes that so exhilarating when you step over that line? It's everything that came before that. It's the training, it's the running in the race, it's the pushing yourself, even though you felt like you were going to throw up. I mean, it's everything that goes into that. When you step over that line, that's just kind of like this moment when you confirm to yourself the journey that it took to get you there. So if you can stop using that point, the moment you have your goal, and you think about, my joy is in the process of achieving, you reinterpret the time you spend in the process, and you realize that I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and this is what is making that moment feel like something worthwhile.
Yeah, that's powerful. We're going to get into that just now, and I can totally relate. Like, I've done a few sporting events myself, and I remember, I think if you had to look back at crossing the finish line, there'd probably be an hour's worth of fantastic moments in my life, but actually, there's probably a good few years worth of time that's gone into training, and that would be a total waste to just like ignore. So you also wrote about actively practicing and passively learning. Or have I got that the right way around?
Yes.
Could you
we're always
explain that?
Yeah, practice. One of the things that we've learned is that in the first 7 years, the brain operates basically in a state of hypnosis. And it's understandable why this happens because, as a child, nobody teaches you to speak. You just watch and you learn how to speak and you learn all the models. Now that can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the environment, but you learn, how do I handle this situation? How do I handle that situation? How do I respond to this? All those things are just happening automatically, and that is learning. And you can be learning all the time, as you are learning all the time, and how you process it, which is very important, because if you understand that, then you begin to understand the behaviors that you're installing into the subconscious. But practice, to me, is the application of energy intentionally with a consciousness of achieving a specific task. And it's done through repetition. You need to know the mechanics. Everything in life is a skill. I don't care whether it's walking, learning to deal with an interview, learning to not let somebody bother you. Some people are really good at that. Some people aren't. All it is that they're just farther along in skill development than you are. And so when you understand that everything is a skill, and we start from no skill and we move on this line of skill development, that if you can learn to enjoy this line, because it's ever unfolding and you're always expanding, then you're in your interpretation of this moment and this experience is completely different. So practice is very intentional. It has a reason for it. It has a goal, an intention of achieving a specific goal, a task, and you are actively involved in it.
Totally agree. And so I'd like to move into weight loss now, because most of the people watching this will be wanting to, apply what you're saying to a health or weight loss transformation. And I think the biggest struggle that we have in a health transformation is giving something up. Okay, so you obviously have to, there are many different schools of thought. So trying to keep it agnostic, you'd have to eat less food or eat less of certain foods, and probably be more active and, pick up a few more habits. So, so what is the actual skill that you're looking for? Because I think people see it as like, I have to lose weight and that's the goal. And like, I just need to lose weight. But it doesn't very often come back to like, what are the skills I need to become proficient at?
Well, one of the skills is, maybe a better word is awareness, is accurate data when you become involved in something like weight loss. So for example, if I say, because accurate data determines your experience and your interpretation. So if I say, I want to lose 30 pounds, that should take 10 days. Well, obviously we can look at that and think that's the most ridiculous thing in the world, but that's only because we have the data for that. If we didn't have the data for that, then what would happen is we would start off on that journey, and 5-6 days into it, we might have lost a few pounds, and then our interpretation, it becomes, I'm not very good at this. Maybe I can't accomplish this. Our whole confidence goes down, and I think it's very important to understand that, because if somebody says to you, you want to lose 30 pounds, that's going to take 3-4 months. Let's pick a number. In 10 days, you don't expect to see 30 pounds off when you step on the scale. So your interpretation of how you're doing is completely different than it is. There's a story I've told many times about a woman that I worked with who had a corporate job, and she left that to become a graphic artist. And so on the first coaching session with me, I asked her, so what are you struggling with? And she said, well, I've been at this for 6 months and I'm not as good as I should be. And you can certainly apply that to weight loss. I've been doing this for 2 weeks. I haven't lost as much as I should have. So I asked her, I said, fair enough. How good should you be? And there was this dead silence. And she said, I don't know. I said, well, if you don't know how good you should be, how do you know you're not better than you should be? And she said, I don't know that either. And I said, well, and again, if we take this to weight loss, and if somebody in 2 weeks, they go to someone, they say, I've only lost 6 pounds. It's not as much as I should. And the person who is the trainer says, are you kidding me? You've actually lost 6 pounds. Your interpretation of that would be completely different. And so I said to her, well, if when you started, you had this skill level, would you have felt you were good? And she said, oh, yeah, I would. And I said, so it's not that you're not getting better. It's that your perception of what good is changing as you move along that line. So that's a skill to me, is being able to understand with an indifference, a detachment of this is, these are the metrics of losing weight, and so that I'm not trying to do something that is just not possible, and understanding that everybody's body is different. Some people lose weight faster than other people. So I think that that's the first thing, because you have to learn to enjoy the process of losing weight. And I should say this, what is the practicing mind? Why did I come up with that title? Because there's all this talk about mindfulness, and I tell people, well, the difference between the practicing mind and mindfulness is part of the practicing mind, but the practicing mind is not mindfulness, because the practicing mind is about learning to enjoy becoming mindful. They're two different things. Being mindful is being mindful, but if learning to become mindful is a miserable experience, that's not the practicing mind. The practicing mind is to be able to say, and I experience this personally, anything I want to accomplish, any goal I want to set out on, any task I want to set on, the goal just serves as my rudder, and I really enjoy the process of where I am now. I don't have any kind of judgment. I don't feel impatient. All those things come from an attachment to a point out there, and when you can lose them, it doesn't make you accomplish the goal any faster being attached. It just makes the experience lousy. So when you can learn to detach from that and put your energy into the present moment, what happens is that you have access to much more of your consciousness, and your experience and your interpretation of what you're doing becomes more joyful and not so filled with frustration and a sense of, when is this going to happen?
And that's gold, because I think, if you take, anyone who wants to get somewhere, there's this frustration, and it's obviously linked to body image, what you see in the mirror, and you're reminded every day, like, you're not as thin as you want to be. I mean, I will add in the caveat that a lot of people who get to the weight that they wanted to be are still not satisfied, and that's like a whole nother kettle of fish. But how do you detach from the goal of being so different to something that's making you so unhappy right now?
Well, the very first thing you have to do, the fundamental building block of all the stuff we're talking about, is you have to realize that you're not your thoughts. You're the one who experiences your thoughts. Some thoughts you intend and you create, but what neuroscience says is over 90%, maybe close to 95% of what we experience during the day is not our conscious mind creating the thoughts. It's programming that we have installed in our subconscious. So if you want to know who you really are, look at your reactions to situations, because that's what you've told your subconscious you are. That's what you've told yourself. When somebody comes up to you and they say something that offends you or upsets you, that is something that somewhere along the line you have either learned or you've told yourself. And what happens is when that trigger happens, the subconscious mind, which its job is basically to give you what it thinks you want. It doesn't judge. It doesn't judge if it's positive, it's happy or sad or funny, or it has no sense of humor. It doesn't do any of that. It just gives you what it thinks you want. So if somebody says something to you that upsets you, or that you experience, that you have an upset thought and then you experience the emotion of the thought, what happens, what is the train that is going on there is the incident happens, and your subconscious mind, which is always awake, even when you're asleep, it's watching, it goes, oh, what we've learned is when this happens, we get this reaction to it, and then it just plays it out. And then you, because you're in the behavior and in the reaction, you experience the emotional content. So how do you get outside of that? Because that's the power of choice. That's the privilege of choice. And that's when you get the opportunity to reprogram yourself. And so that you have to do through what I'm going to call thought awareness training. There's an observer of your thoughts, and then there's the mind that creates the thoughts. If you say to your mind, I need to figure out this math problem, well, now you're using your left brain. But when something happens and you just react to it, you really don't realize how much control your subconscious has over you. So I'll give you a quick example. I was having this conversation with a client, and they said, no, I don't buy that. I think I'm in control. and I'm aware of, what I'm making decisions on how, I'm going to react. And so I set him up with this, and I just said, you need to shut up until I tell you to talk. And the person went back like that. And I said, you see, you're not in control. All I had to do was change my tone and create a trigger for you. And I said, there was no decision making there. You didn't say, that's an interesting way to talk to me. How do I want to react to it? I said, you just reacted. I said, because that's what's installed. I said, so in order to get to the place, you have to understand that your mind is a problem-solving machine. That's what it does. If you don't give it a problem, it's going to go in search mode and look for a problem. That's why it doesn't like to be in the present moment, because it gets bored. And it's like, yeah, this is easy. This is easy. I got to go find something to do. And so it's always trying to run off. So, but you, the real you, not the ego, but the real you is sitting there watching all of this. And when you can get to be anchored in that, that's when the thoughts don't have control over you, and the reactions to the thoughts don't have control over you. And that's how hypnosis works. I mean, that's because it's basically they get past the installed responses and they reinstall other responses. So to me, you have to practice thought awareness training. And how do you do that? I mean, it's just a label. You can call it meditation. It doesn't really matter, but all you're really doing is learning that I am not my thoughts, and my mind works without me noticing it and without my permission. So you can sit in a chair. I would say two ways. You don't want guided meditation for this, because guided meditation is asking you to think, and we don't want thoughts. We just want a mind that's quiet. It's not still. It's just quiet. And so you sit there and you say, in a chair upright, you don't want your body to be a distraction. So you want to be in a comfortable position, and you close your eyes and you say, I'm just going to watch my body breathe. That's the mechanics. I'm just going to watch my body breathe. I'm not going to try to make it breathe. It knows how to breathe. I'm not going to say, well, maybe I should breathe deeper. Maybe I should breathe. No, just let your body fall into its rhythm and you watch that. Or you could use a phrase based, and your phrase based could be anything that makes you feel good. It could be, it shouldn't be a long phrase. It should be, I am beautiful. I am thin. I'm calm. Just something that's very short. And the reason for that, both of those, is you're going to give your mind one task to do, just one task. That way you have a point of relativity of when it's not doing that task. And what happens in this process very quickly is that you say, we'll just say we're going to watch our breath. You sit there and you start out, and maybe for 30 seconds, if you're lucky, you are watching your breath. And then all of a sudden your mind goes, this is so boring. I'm going to go work on that report, or what I should have said to so-and-so, or and it just takes off. And you are so in your thoughts, like you've always been your whole life, that you just go with it. And you don't even know you've gone with it. You're just going and you're experiencing everything, every thought the mind is creating. And then the juice happens. You wake up and you go, I'm thinking about this, and I'm not paying attention to my breath. And that's where everything happens. And this is where people get tripped up, because in that microsecond, when you notice what your mind is doing, the observer has just woken up and gotten more aware, and your willpower to pull it back on task and make the mind do what you are telling it to do has gotten stronger. So every repetition of that, this is where people say, I'm terrible at it. When I do this, I'm just chasing my mind all the time. I'm like, yeah, well, you couldn't be chasing your mind if you weren't noticing your mind wasn't doing what you want. So that's really great. And you also have to understand that some days your mind is relatively calm, and sometimes some periods during the day your mind is calmer. Other times you may have things going on in your life where you're feeling more agitated, and so it's going to be more, you're going to feel more antsy when you sit down, and you're going to feel like not sitting still, but it's all part of the practice. There is no wrong meditation, and there is no bad meditation. You can't be bad at meditation. I've been doing it for over 40 years, and some days it's a fist fight with my mind, and other days it's just like I'm in like a state of euphoria. So it's just the sine wave of the experience. But what it does, it's the key to the prison door. Because let's take it out into the real world. You do that, and I see this over and over again with the clients I work with. What ends up happening is they notice that their mind is producing a thought that is not making them happy. They're not having the thought. The mind is just creating the thought, and they realize, I am not the thought, and I'm going to change that thought. Because now you have the opportunity to do that. Before you didn't. You're just in the thought. So this is what to me is so fundamental for everything that we're talking about, because without that separateness, you don't have any power.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about so what did you call it again? When it's what sounds like weightlifting for silencing the mind. But you said it's the exercise where you sit and you concentrate on your breathing. You said it's something training. What was
thought
the
awareness training? That's what I call it. Thought awareness, because what are we doing? We're learning to be aware of the thoughts that our mind is producing. And I've done this with like high school kids. It's really amazing because their mind is so overstimulated with their phones and everything else. And we're learning that, I used to be a voracious reader, and I was noticing it was harder and harder for me to sit for 15, 20 minutes and read a book, whereas I used to read for hours. And because our brain is so overstimulated and ramped up. And what does that mean? Well, we're asking our brains to function at a higher frequency, to move faster and faster in order to stay up with everything that's coming at us all day long. And especially like if you go back 150 years where people were just walking on a road or sitting on a horse, there wasn't any stimulus going on. Now we're just overstimulated everywhere. The commercials, the television, everything. The media has a connection to us 24/7. And so what ends up happening there is that when these kids, I told them, I said, look, this is what I want you to do. I want you to sit in your chair and close your eyes, and I'm going to put a timer on for 2 minutes, and I want you to stop thinking, which I knew they couldn't do. And so at 2 minutes, I said, all right, it's 2 minutes. Well, when they came out of that, they were like, they were just totally stunned. I couldn't do it. I kept telling my mind, stop thinking, but it just kept going. And I said, that's right. And if your mind won't stop when you tell it to, then who's in charge? Because it's not you. Your mind's in charge. You're not in charge. You're telling your mind, don't think. And it's going, too bad for you. I'm going to continue thinking. And so you need to get a hold of that. And what I found was that these kids, it was the little bit of calmness that they had was so inviting to them. They wanted to know how to do it more. And I know a few of them that did, because I was in touch with their parents. It completely changed their scholastics and their academics, because they started meditating every day. They started to realize what it felt like to have a mind that wasn't agitated all the time and it wasn't always running. And they liked that. And it was an escape for them to just be quiet and to experience a mind that is less filled with thoughts.
Yeah, a lot of people are worried they're going to miss like a notification on their phone if they just keep quiet for like 10 minutes. So that's power. So, so I think I said earlier, like only 2% of dieters actually, or dieters follow through on their diets and achieve their outcome. And I believe the percent may even be lower on the people who like keep that weight off for more than a year. It's really, really bad and are tough to deal with. And one of the things you said was, now, so this is slightly off context, and I'm hoping we can marry the two, but you said that judging your performance is this wasted energy that could go into your work. Could you link those together?
Yeah. If you're a basketball player and you're shooting foul shots, and you have to make, the team is in a position where you get 2 foul shots. You've got to make one of them for the team to win. So you make the first foul shot and you miss it. Now you're at a fork in the road there. Your reaction to that can be disgust and anger and mad at yourself and throw the ball down and all that sort of stuff. Or you can observe it and look at it with non-judgment, and just gather the information that the shot gave you back. So my question would be, is the first reaction going to make you perform better or worse on the second try? I mean, the first reaction of getting angry, it's really a question of practicality. The first reaction is only going to degrade your performance. It's going to make your experience of this moment very uncomfortable. And so if you realize that the information that you're talking about here is, the information is neither good or bad. It's your interpretation of the information that gives you the experience of the information. So if you interpret the information, how do you want to interpret the information? You want to interpret the information in the way that is going to give you the highest performance and the best feeling. And that simply is not self-judgment. I mean, it just isn't. That's just a fact. Now, that I'm not saying that, well, not now means it's easy. No, it's just, here's the fact. The fact is that interpreting it, throwing the ball into the stands and getting mad is only going to make it worse for your brain to refocus, because it's not looking at the information. And there, it's just expressing emotion. The other way, as I said in the practicing mind, do, observe, correct. Okay, the hoop is the target. The target is feeding back to you. You do, which is make the shot. As the ball flies through the air, you're observing the ball flight. Now, is the ball left, right, short? Is it going to bounce off the backboard? You're gathering information, and then you refine that information with correction. So the second shot, you're going to perform higher, but there's no judgment in any of that. It's just, how do I perform at the highest level? How do I increase my chances to accomplish what in my heart I want to do? So that's why I'm saying, if getting upset and degrading yourself and judging you would make you accomplish the goal faster and more times, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But the fact is that it is only going to stop you. So to me, I'm a very practical person. And so when I really see things from that perspective, and I practice thought awareness, and I notice that I've installed this reaction to this particular situation, and the situation happens, and I notice how I'm feeling, because that's what you want to pay attention to. Your feelings will tell you what thoughts you're having, because the feelings always come after the thought. And so when you have this feeling and you start to monitor your feelings and say, this is making me uncomfortable, this is making me sad, this is making me feel bad about myself, then you need to change the thought, because you are in control of the thought. The thought shouldn't be in control of you. And this feeling bad, is not going to make the situation better, and it's not going to make you perform better if you're trying to lose weight and you step on the scale and you're not seeing as many pounds off as you wanted. Getting all upset about that isn't going to make you lose weight faster. And that sounds like you're oversimplifying it, but just if you just go with the practical fact, the number on the scale is just information. That's all it is. It's just information. How you interpret that information is going to determine how you react to the situation, and how you react to the situation is going to determine how you experience it and how you perform moving forward.
Totally. And then, adding to that, there's the concept of the beginner's mind. And I think you said so I'd never heard of it before. I think you said it's a Zen concept. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, Zen, and I've adapted it a little bit, but in the beginner's mind is empty. And the beginner's mind is also completely absorbed in the process of what it's doing. So think about it, when you first learn to ride a bicycle, or you first learn to walk, you can't be thinking about something else later in the day. It takes all of your attention in this moment to do this task. There's also, it's a complete present moment functioning. That's a beginner's mind. Now, the irony of this, or the paradox, is that the more proficient you get at whatever skill you're developing, the harder it becomes to hold on to the beginner's mind, because as the skill level goes up, it begins to be put into the background, and the subconscious can run it without you actively being a part of it. And that's, the problem with our brains is that they haven't really evolved a lot from the hunter-gatherer days, so you needed to, once you needed to walk, that needed to be put on autopilot, so that you weren't paying attention to it if you had to run. I mean, you think about all the things that happen during the day that you're not thinking about. Just running your body is just unbelievable, But flinching if something comes at your face, all these things, you don't think about them. They're just handled for you. And so as they become, and there's a reason for that. The reason for that, with the subconscious, the reason we habitualize so many things, our subconscious looks at everything we do, and it watches for the things that we repeat. And that's not just things we do physically, but the way we think and we interpret situations. It watches them, and it says, okay, when this happens, this is the response. And why does it do that? Well, because when you're learning something, it takes up a lot of the processing power of the brain. And you can look at it like RAM on a computer, that it's eating up RAM. As soon as the computer can offload stuff out of RAM, it opens up more for processing. So what it does, the way it does that is it's really an efficient system, is it watches, and it watches for how you repeat things. And as soon as it sees something that you repeat, it says, oh, we can make this into a habit, and then just throw it back there and it'll just be auto. And if you understand this, then you understand why you react to situations the way you do. It's not a good or a bad. It's just you've reacted to things this way. And so because of that, this is what happens. And now the problem with that is that there's no conscious choice making in auto responses. They just happen. And it's even worse if you're not even noticing that they're happening. You're just experiencing the thing being executed. So it's just this big loop that we talk about here. Is like, in order to get out of that loop, you have to be outside of the loop, and you do that through thought awareness training, and then everything opens up after that. Then you can start working on how do I want to respond? I mean, because many times I ask people, they talk about, let's just talk about weight loss. And you get on the scale and it's not telling you what you want. I will ask somebody in that situation. I would say, all right, and I say it really upsets me, etc. And I'll say, well, if I could touch you on the head with a magic wand, and you could react to that any way you want, what would that be? Well, they don't know. And I said, well, if you don't know, you don't even have a target. Like, you're just experiencing the anxiety and the frustration of the moment. But suppose you said, well, I want that to have absolutely no impact on my confidence or anything. All right, now you got a target. So let's start working on that. How are we going to make that happen? But if you don't even have that, then you're just a puppet to whatever the scale says. And that's why this whole thought awareness thing is just so important.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, we're kind of like little icebergs just floating through the wilderness, exploding every time we bump into something. To use Freud's iceberg analogy, all of our reactions and stuff happening on the surface. That's nuts. Okay.
And the other thing is that as I said, the mind it operates in this mode. It's as a protection thing, because we don't have to think about a lot of things as they happen. But where it does us in is we are not aware of what our mind is doing. And for the most part, as people go through their day, they're really just living programming. They're really not consciously thinking. The left brain does all the conscious thinking. The right brain stores the information and then executes. And once you understand the mechanics of that, now the next thing is, okay, now I have to learn to be outside of my thoughts. Okay, well, the practicing, now that's going to be work. Okay, so what's the practicing mind? The practicing mind is learning to enjoy the process of becoming aware of your thoughts and enjoying restructuring your thought process, so that you're going to have to work at this, and you're going to have to be committed to it. So if you enjoy it, it's the chances of you being successful at it are much better than if you say, well, when I'm good at this, then I'll be happy. Well, see, there you're right back to, there's the goal. I'm here, and now I got to work at this stuff, and I really don't feel like it. I just want to be good at it. Well, when this is what I find so amusing.
Yeah. So do you need to run like right now? Or have you got a couple more minutes?
Oh, no, I'm fine. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, so this is the thing that I can guarantee you everyone's going to struggle to get their head around, and it takes a lot to let go. But you said that you are never done. So you should perform in a way that you will never be done. So,
right. I think that's such a blessing. You can interpret it one of two ways. The way you just described it with your tone, which is, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be done. And we're not comfortable with that. Because we're so overtaxed, we want closure. That's just how people are. We want closure. We want this report done. We want the kids picked up. We want the grocery shopping done. We just want stuff done because we have too much on our plate. So when you tell them that, look, this is a life's work, it's like exercise. You can be unfit, and then you learn how to exercise, and then through this process of exercise, you get fit. Well, what happens if you stop exercising? You'll eventually be unfit again. So this is a part of life, but what it does do is increase your enjoyment of life. And I think, what people have to understand is we have, as human spirits, we have the capability of an infinite level of expansion. An artist all artists understand this, whether they're musicians or dancers or whatever. They feel like they're just on this path that goes on forever. Now they're learning this. Next week they'll be learning that, and the joy is in learning it, as opposed to feeling like I'm going to get to this point where, well, I'm done with this now, go do something else. And that, I think, is the beauty of this, and it's the message in life. I think where people get hung up is, an analogy that I use is, if you're a musician and you want to be a musician, so you go for a piano lesson. On the very first day of piano lessons, you don't know anything, and the teacher says, okay, here's a piece of sheet music. Here's the notes on the page. Here they are on the keyboard. These are the fingers you use to press them. Where are you in that moment? You're at your threshold. That's as far as you can go, is you're at your threshold. So you have this feeling inside of, this is a struggle. Now, struggle is a label, and it has a connotation to it, but it's just information. The situation is giving you information, and it's letting you know that you're up against your threshold. Now, let's go 10 years down the road. Now you're playing these very advanced jazz pieces or a classical piece you're working on. And what is that experience? It's the same experience, because you're working at something that you can't do yet. And the skill has gotten you to this point where you can even attempt it. And so now, how does you feel inside? You feel like you're struggling. And so it's very easy to interpret that as, I'm not getting anywhere. I don't feel any differently than I did when I was back there. Well, yeah, you are getting somewhere, but your perception is you're always up against that threshold. And that feeling that you feel when you feel like you're struggling, all that's telling you is you're in the process of mastering something that you're not good at yet. That's all it's telling you. We interpret that as negative, and we allow it to make us feel bad and all this stuff. But all it's really doing is saying, hey, if you were good at this, it would be easy, and you wouldn't be having that feeling of struggle. So the fact that you're having that feeling of struggle, forget that word, the emotion that's usually attached to that word. Just look at it as, I'm giving you data. It's just data. It's information that you're in the process of learning something and mastering it, and you can't be doing that unless you're in that process. You have to be in the process of struggling, of feeling that struggle in order to get good at it. And so it's, to me, when I have those situations, I look at it, my interpretation of the situation is, oh, good. Like, here's my chance to execute stuff that I think is going to work for this. And I just gather the data and I don't judge it. And I go, well, afterwards I debrief, well, this thing I came up with worked pretty well. This thing not so well. I'm going to have to work on that. Maybe I need to think about that a little bit. So my interpretation, again, of the situation when I feel that I'm struggling is just, how are you saying? The universe is just, touching me on the shoulder and go, hey, you noticing this? You noticing? You're not real good at this. And here's your opportunity to work on it. I'm giving it to you. So just go with it and see what you can, see what you can do with it and learn from from your execution. And then we are really in control of so much more of our happiness than we give ourselves credit for. And that's really the value, the big value of coaching, with people, is that whenever we read a book that gets us all excited or something like that, it's like trying to teach ourselves music. Can you teach yourself how to play? Yeah, it's conceivable that you can, but what ends up happening is you don't have any accountability. You don't have to meet with this person. You don't have them watching how you interpret situations and then saying, well, are you noticing that listen to what you just said, and you interpret it, and then you you turn the situation around. And that is what, an objective observer in your life, even if it's just for a period of time, that's where it really brings value, because you feel like it's like what I said in the beginning. You read the book, you get excited, you watch a video, you get excited, and then it basically peaks, and then it just starts to tail off because you have nothing reinforcing it. So anyway, for myself, I've had mentors, because I understand that. And I've always, when I got into golf, I made sure I had a great instructor, and because I had learned that in music, I thought I'm not gonna move so fast because I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's, on that note, I wanted to ask you about what you actually do. So you did say earlier you do some coaching, and you've got another book which we didn't even talk about, which is called Fully Engaged, and you're working on another one. So what are the projects that you've got going at the moment, and how can people get?
Well, right now we're going to restructure all the websites and basically combine them into one, because I have the Practicing Mind Institute, and people we'll end up having. There'll be free stuff, and people can get. They'll have access to interviews like this that I've done, articles that have been written about the practicing mind or fully engaged, and I'm gonna I do some group coaching, but people can go to tomsterner.com and they can sign up for. I'll talk to anybody for half an hour for free, and we can talk about what they have going on and whether I think I can make a difference in their life, or that they think I can make a difference in their life. And we can talk about that. I usually try to solve some problems for them, whatever the half an hour, allows. And I love doing it. Like I said, there's no pressure on it. I am like, I can't stand the follow-ups and are you going to do this? Are you going to do, I don't do that. It's like we meet, we have a talk, and I give you the information and I try to help you, and then you have to sit and make the decision. Do I want to commit to something like this? And it's funny because people, they'll spend money on all kinds of stuff, but they'll be less likely to invest in themselves, in terms of changing the way they experience their life for the rest of their life, but it's very rewarding, and I just enjoy people.
It's like I'm in debt for buying so much crap, but I'm not going to pay someone to help me get out of debt.
Right. That's right. That's a great analogy.
Awesome. Tom, it's been awesome having you on the show. And like I said earlier, it's an honor. Your book really did change my life. And I know that, in fact, even chatting to you now, I realize how much of the stuff in your book is actually in my own coaching practice. So it's been fantastic. And I know that everyone who watches this, especially after we mail it out, is going to benefit hugely. So if you're watching, like and share, like the page, go and visit Tom's website, tomsterner.com.
Yep.
And Tom, what a pleasure. I hope we can have you.
Thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Awesome, man.